points. I too made a handout. It's not much of a handout, it just has a few pictures, but on the second page of the handout is a listing, I'll show you that, of churches. And these include Episcopal, Baptist, Methodist, and various churches, Jewish organizations that accept evolution completely. This is their statement. They have no problem with it. And as Bernie mentioned, the Catholic Church also, it's their official point of view. And what I find most compelling about that point is if you know the Catholic Church history, they have been the most conservative, and they still are to some extent. And they only apologized to Galileo 15 years ago. It just shows you some of their conservative nature. Now they admitted it before then, but their official apology wasn't that long ago. So that when Pope Pius XII made it official in 1950 that you can accept evolution without any conflict with the church, it just, to me, speaks wonders about how these two are compatible. The other thing I'd like to say is I'm not a biology instructor. I don't do research. And while I have followed this debate for years, I'm probably not the best person to be up here. If I could put somebody in my place, I'd probably put somebody from the local college that teaches a subject. But if I could really put somebody here, if I really had godlike powers, if I can say that, I would pick one of two people. One would be Ken Miller. Ken Miller, many of you may know Ken Miller, Dr. Miller. He's well known on this subject. He's written multiple books. This is one of them. And if you have an open mind and you have not read about evolution, if you are interested, this is one of several books I'd recommend, called Finding Darwin's God, A Scientist's Search for Common Ground Between God and Evolution. He testified at the Dover trial some years ago, and I've met him personally. I actually told him to his face that he's one of my heroes because he bridges this gap. So he'd be the first person. The second person I would probably want to bring up is Richard Dawkins, and his book on evolution, and many prior ones related, is fabulous. But a third person, and probably a better person, just to again bridge the gap that might exist in this room, would probably be Francis Collins. And again, I suspect many of you know Francis Collins, head of the Human Genome Project. And he wrote this book, The Language of God. And he has many comments on here about how his belief in God is so strong, but equal comments about evolution and his complete certainty of its accuracy. So if you get nothing more, in my opinion, from this debate or talk or question and answers, I want that to be stressed the most, that it does not have to be two gentlemen who have an atheistic point of view and don't believe in God versus two others and others here who believe in God. It should not be that debate. This is about the science of evolution. So does evolution, and when I talk about evolution, biologic evolution, like the terms used in other sciences, does it prove what it says it means? In other words, does it show that organisms started off primitive, descended, had common descent, and had changes enough to create different animals and species? And are there other sciences that combine with this science of evolution in support of it? So does chemistry and physics, contrary to a comment earlier, show that the Earth is 4.8 billion years old? Yes. The earliest life forms were 3.5 billion years ago? Absolutely. And we have a progress, and this is on one of my handouts too, of different life forms over hundreds of millions and billions of years. And we can talk about that if we can in some detail. But these are facts, that this pattern is there. And some of you may say, whoa, wait a minute. Evolution's not factual, it's a theory, right? Well, a theory in science is based on facts, observations and facts. So that Dr. Miller in his book wrote this: evolution is as much a fact as anything we know in science, on page 53. And Dr. Dawkins in his book wrote, evolution is a fact beyond reasonable doubt, beyond serious doubt. In addition to those comments and many others, both of them give so much support in all the sciences and how they combine. This is not just evolution. If you want to come to the conclusion evolution is not accurate, you're going to have to take on every other science. That would include geology, paleontology, zoology, botany, 1 minute, comparative anatomy, molecular biology, population genetics, embryology, the development of embryology, a new, relatively new science, evo-devo, all of physics and chemistry. Not the entire sciences would be wrong, but each one of those sciences converge upon the same conclusion. So hopefully we'll make that point today as we get into other discussion, and actually, I don't need the last 30 seconds.
Well, how about one 30-second quote from Billy Graham. Has anybody in here heard of Billy Graham? Couple people? Okay, he says, I don't think that there's any conflict at all between science today and the scriptures. I think that we have misinterpreted the scriptures many times, and we've tried to make the scriptures say things they weren't meant to say. I think that we have made a mistake by thinking the Bible is a scientific book. The Bible is not a book of science. The Bible is a book of redemption, and of course I accept the creation story. I believe that God did create the universe. I believe that God created man, and whether it came by an evolutionary process, and at a certain point he took this person or being and made him a living soul or not, does not change the fact that God did create man. Whichever way God did it makes no difference as to what man is and what's man's relationship to God. That's Billy Graham in his Personal Thoughts of a Public Man in 1997.
Okay, I just want to do one quote.
Dennis, one more word.
He already had that.
Cut him off.
You got a quote, I got a quote. Basically, what they're doing is they're arguing from authority and they're giving opinions, people's opinions. Let me give some facts by evolutionists who say there's no missing link. They'll say, okay, paleontologists have had an enormous price to pay for Darwin's argument. We fancy ourselves as the only true students of life's history, yet to preserve our favorite account of evolution by natural selection, we view our data as so bad that we almost never see the very process we profess to study. Now here's where he presents some facts. And by the way, this is Stephen Gould, who's an evolutionist. The history of most fossil species include two features particularly inconsistent with gradualism. One is stasis. Most species exhibit no directional change during their tenure on Earth. They appear in the fossil record looking much the same as when they disappear. Morphological change is usually limited and directionless. And then the second one is sudden appearance. In any local area, a species does not arise gradually by the steady transformation of its ancestors. It appears all at once and fully formed.
Okay, now it's your turn. Who's got some questions? Go ahead.
I was pretty amazed to hear Brandon destroy his own theory when he talked about continental drift. Continental drift didn't occur over a few thousand years. It took millions of years for continental drift to split the. So you're saying it happened all at once?
You're talking about plate tectonics and putting it into the creation, the young Earth creation model?
Yeah.
Okay. There are different theories on how to do that. Actually, the evolutionists these days, some of them are starting to decide that maybe we accepted plate tectonics a little too quickly in the 1960s. We are coming up with data that seems to be contradicting it here and there. So the theory in and of itself is not complete. There are things we don't know about plate tectonics. So the question as to how that works in a young Earth creationist model, for one thing, it seems like if it occurred, which it probably did, something along those lines probably did, it was probably during the flood. Exactly how and how much and the details and that kind of thing, there are a few competing models. Creationists are trying to work out the details. When it comes down to it, evolutionists have probably at least 100 times as many scientists as we do. They have a lot more funding, and they've had a good 200 or 300 years longer than we have to come up with their theories and models. So there are a lot of things we're still trying to work out.
So you're still insisting that the shifting of the continents took place in a short period of time?
It seems like to some extent they have. How much, we don't know.
That goes in the face of all scientific evidence.
Why is that?
Well, for instance, there are records that go back thousands of years. The Egyptians, the Chinese,
Right.
they make no mention of this.
This would have occurred during Noah's flood. No one was alive on the planet except for Noah.
Well, let me just say a few things here too. I think what Brandon's point too is that there's a worldwide flood, and this shift, these tectonic plates, didn't happen over 1,000 years like you just said. It's happened over a year. So when it shifts just a little bit, we get massive earthquakes. And now he's saying it's shifted. All these continents shifted massively. I mean, it's
Yeah, the Bible does say it was catastrophic and destroyed everything on the planet. So some of these earthquakes, yeah, I'll give you all that, absolutely.
But there's no evidence of the Great flood except the Bible.
Not true.
No, there's lots of evidence.
No,
There's
no,
lots of
you're
evidence.
right.
We just, unfortunately.
Next
don't have
question.
time.
I guess a comment to the creationist researchers here. I think you, that there might be some other ways besides massive research projects where you could ask the question, can we move the continents in a large amount during the flood? Because it's not just waves and things that would be generated, but let's say the amount of heat from friction that would be generated. You could probably, in a couple of hours with a decent mathematician, figure out how far you can move the continents during the floods before you vaporize the entire oceans and everything just boil, and all those animals in the ark.
Creationists have done that math. Yeah.
And what did they find out? How far can you move it?
Well, if you're looking at the Earth the way it exists now, not very far, not very fast. But did the Earth before the flood look the way it does now? The Bible says one of the mechanisms of destruction was the fountains of the great deep. What does that mean? It seems to suggest water coming up from under the ground. We don't know exactly where it came from, what that means. A model has been proposed. It's called the hydroplate theory, which not everyone agrees with. It may have some merit, but it suggests that there was actually a layer of water under the lithosphere, under the continental crust. That would have lubricated its movement, and we essentially remove friction as being a problem.
You remove friction.
With a layer of water, it's very, very little friction, very, very little heat, and all of a sudden that heat problem you just mentioned, for the most part, disappears.
All right,
Go ahead.
I would like to make a statement. Okay. One thing that Brandon referenced in regards to this, there's this project called RATE. It's called Radioisotopes and the Age of the Earth. Okay, and so this is a really huge 8-year research project where the young Earth creationists want to prove things about radiometric dating. The ASA is the American Scientific Affiliation, actually did a review of this. They're fellow Christians. They're young Earthers, old Earthers, and evolutionary. They don't have a position. But let me tell you what, first of all, they said there's two big problems with this. One is there would be such incredible heat, there's no way to cool the Earth. And the RATE group admitted that in their volume in their book, and they said, we're looking for answers for this. The second thing is they're proposing that the radiation would have been so high, we don't know how life would have even how to survive that. And they said that's another thing they're looking for answers on.
I have answers.
But I want to give you this quote from the ASA director. He says, the ASA does not take a position on issues when there is an honest disagreement among Christians, provided there is adherence to our statement of faith and to integrity in science. Accordingly, the ASA neither endorses nor opposes young Earth creationism, which recognizes the possibility of a recent creation with appearance of age, or which acknowledges the unresolved discrepancy between scientific data and the young Earth position. However, claims that scientific data affirm a young Earth do not meet the criterion of integrity in science. Any portrayal of the RATE project as confirming scientific support for young Earth contradicts the RATE project's own admission of unresolved problems. The ASA can and does oppose such deception. Deception, this is from Christians, fellow Christians, saying it's a deceptive presentation of work.
Okay, can I address that?
Can we move on?
Real quick.
We're not
Okay.
even on evolutions, I might suggest we move forward.
Well, just real quick.
Okay.
Lisa, you brought it up.
Okay, so what about all this radiation? If radioactive decay was accelerated during the flood, what about all the radiation? What about all the heat? Where was it? Where was it generated? For the most part, probably deep within the mantle, or at least the upper layers of the mantle. That's where the lava, for the most part, comes from, forms these volcanoes, forms the lava layers that we have now. That means the crust of the Earth in general would have been able to shield Noah and the ark from the radiation. That also means that most of the heat is probably still trapped in the upper mantle and lower. It hasn't had time to come out yet, so the heat from accelerated decay isn't really an issue either.
Go ahead.
I have a question. I think that Brandon made a reference to, if I understand right, the fossil record and how maybe there are human remains that there should be.
He referenced, but yeah, I can answer.
Oh, okay. What's the reference I can look at?
A very good book, yeah.
Or maybe a website would be
Don't know if I have a website.
Can you restate the claim too?
Right,
Tell me the book and I'll figure it out from there.
Okay, the claim was that human fossil remains are found in places in the fossil record where they absolutely should not be.
And I'm wondering what you guys think about it.
Okay, a book I can recommend is called Forbidden Archaeology. This is it looks like a dictionary, something like 900 pages. 1998. It was a very thorough look at a lot of fossil claims, fossils being found in places